we will have Nick van Apeldoorn from BUAS, which will speak about game mechanics. We will have Davide De Leone from CLAC that will speak about play in a city pandemia. And we will have Marco Ingrassia from IAC that will make a demonstration of the Super Barrio app that has been developed at IAC as a game for participation. So I'm very happy to leave the floor to Nick, and I will also stop to share my presentation. So Nick, if you would like to start.
I would very much like to start. Here's my presentation, presenters mode. Everything is in place now. Perfect. So hi, my name is Nick van Apeldoorn. I'm a researcher at Redesire University of Applied Sciences. I'm quite used to talking at conferences. I think this is the first conference that is completely digital, and also the first presentation I ever gave, in which I'm not sure if everyone who was watching it was actually wearing pants. Yeah, this is a bit of who I am. I'm a researcher and a project leader at BUAS. I have a background in spatial planning, and my master really focuses about urban sociology. And when I started to work as a researcher, I was mostly focusing on projects which were about social inclusion, especially of minority groups, kids and elderly people. And for the one who know me a little bit longer, also outside my work, I love playing games. I'm quite a game fanatic. Whenever I was a child, I loved playing games. I was very competitive. I still am. I'm not good at losing games, and I've worked for now 8 years as a game leader, in which I facilitate serious games. So when I came to BUAS, if we want to collaborate on this project, BUAS said, really cool idea. And they asked me, because I like games, because I think about inclusion quite often in my work. And I love working with all those little different tech elements that make this field so beautiful. Because what is a game? I was asked to talk about the game mechanics.
Sorry, Nick, for the interruption. We can see the your notes for the presenter.
No problem. Then I click them away. Is that better?
Thank you. Yeah, it's perfect.
Perfect. So talking about the game mechanics, I think two principles should be leading when thinking about urban games. The first one is, if it doesn't feel like a game, there's a very good chance you're not actually develop a game, because a game has all those sort of play elements. It has to be fun. It has to be interesting. It has to be challenging. It has to make you question stuff. I think this is always an important question to keep in mind when thinking of gamification of public space. And the second one is, if it's just a game, then what is its purpose? Like, do we only have games to make it interesting, to make it fun, or can we do even more with it? And I think this is exactly the playing field that we, within public play space, try to investigate. Like, what can we do with urban games? Because this is the big question. We have big groups of people think through games about placemaking. So in the end, we have participatory placemaking through play. And I think that's a very interesting philosophy, because if you look at how the digitalization of public space, but also from people, is progressing, is going so fast. Like, everyone has a smartphone at this point, and pretty much all those phones have already augmented reality in them. Like, for the audience who ever played Pokemon Go, that is a form of very basic augmented reality. And this is something we will see much more often in the future, and it's only going to get bigger and bigger. So I think this is a very interesting question to ask at this point. What can games actually mean for urban planning, for space making, for architecture? So then you start a project and you think about urban games. Like, there's already some work before us. We just started in October, so we're quite new to this field, although we have some past experience. So if you look at urban games in Google, you get 1,130,000,000 search results, and which is impressive, just in 0.63 seconds. So there's already a lot out there. Only a big problem is, like, it's hard to find really quality data and games that you could use for urban planning and space making. And I think this is exactly something in the gap that we from Public Play Space try to fill. So then you start thinking about it. Okay, there are so many good examples of things that we could do. But if you or a municipality just want to implement the game tomorrow, I wish them a lot of luck, because it's quite difficult to find good examples according to their needs. And this is something that we try to solve with a catalog, with a book, and try to bring that to people in open game events. So we started thinking on how can we actually first scope what there is. Like, I'm a researcher, I like to think on the big theory levels, the big skills. And I have some amazing interns working with me on this project. So we started sketching, like, what are the elements of different games? So we thought about space, about game, about play, and then think of all the subcategories to help people navigate through what is already there. And we're going to develop a wiki about it. So then you also need a good classification structure to make it even useful. Otherwise, this is still an issue. It's about making one of those 1 billion plus games applicable for many people, and if they need games, to give them quick and easy access to it. So this is just a theory, but how can we actually apply it to existing games? So we published a call. A lot of people reacted to it. If you personally also work in this field and would like to hand in, we're still interested to hear your ideas about games. You can ask us in the chat box about how to publish a call. And one of those was Redesire. It's a game developed by Rolf van Boxmeer. He's an architect, and with a team of also artists, he thought about how can we let big groups of people think about the different desires when developing an area. And Redesire is about making it possible to make them visible at the start of a project, because now, quite often, not you, because you're all perfect architects have experienced this. You develop a perfect plan, and in the end, you try to present it to the people, and they don't like it. And that's when we have a problem. What Redesire tries to do is try to map those potential problems now, and try to play them out and see, like, what are the different desires of different stakeholders and how can we balance them in one design. So it plays like a game. It's both digitally and analog. You play it with a group from 3 to 20 people, and you divide them in different stakeholder categories. Then you let them write down, like, what their desires are, their most important ones. And then you play different rounds, and each round you present a design and people can comment on it. It's sort of like a big digital brainstorm session. In the end, people can rank it to really see, like, if your desires also match their desires. And then the winning team is the one in which the desires of the people matches best with the desires of the designers, to see if you can find some balance in that. And just like in the real world, it's not just about, here's your idea and this is what we can do about it. It's also about the dialogue in it, the communication, also compelling people to really understand that point of view and the deeper meaning behind it. So it's about negotiation, it's about discussion, it's about presentation, it's about using different words. And as the developers of this game thought of themselves, at the end of every round, you can write a compelling haiku to compel the other people that it's actually a very good game. And this also enhances a bit of the play element in it. It's not all serious. It's also about, creative, open your mind and really try to see what we can do with some sort of an area. So if you look at what we design, like, what does it do actually? Like, how can we map it in the structure? And by no means this is the final version of the structure. We still have quite some time to develop it further. But this is what we have now. And it's this game, Redesire, is really about activation of different stakeholder groups, the interconnection between them. It's about raising awareness of the different desires that are in a certain area among different stakeholders, and also visualize their needs. And if you look at the co-creation part, which is very important for placemaking and participation, is the co-analysis of a certain area. Like, how can it look? What are the different needs? Where are we going to go with this? And then the outcome is a big map of all the possibilities that you have and all the do's and don'ts if you work with different stakeholder groups. And that is like how the game is desired on itself, the purpose, the co-creation, and its outcomes. And then we also have the play part. So the mechanics, the dynamics, and the aesthetics. So it's a role play game. You're different stakeholders. You can do it like factually, like everyone who works for the municipality is part of the municipality, the citizens. But it's also really interesting to mix it up. It's not that you have to play with those different actors if you're from a certain field of work. You can also interconnect with them and to really step in each other's shoes and think about, okay, what could it do? What would it mean for me if I was a citizen in that area? In terms of dynamics, it's really about the digital interface and the analog that word I can't pronounce, sorry. The digital and the analog interface of it, because that is also a beautiful thing of what games could do. If you only make it digital, you lose really a big part of the negotiation, of the discussion, something that is crucial for placemaking. But by also making it digital, you collect data and you can upscale it to a bigger level. And I think that's combination between the two of them is one of the reasons I chose this project to tell you a bit more about. In terms of aesthetics, it's really about imagination and the assemblage of a good idea, how it could look like, and have then a discussion about it. And if you think about space, it's often about a neighborhood level. If you just do it on a street level, it has to be a very exciting street. There are some examples of them, but mostly it's played at a neighborhood level with different stakeholders, and it could be all of them. The one that you mentioned here, the community stakeholders, the planning experts, and the policymakers. And if the scope, it's medium high. And I think that's also important to have an idea about what it can do for you as an organization, because in the end, you want to play a game. If you're looking for a great example of a game, which is for 80 people and you only have 10, then it's probably not the right fit for you. So this is sort of a big navigation map through the game to your needs. Other great example is the block by block. It's developed by UN Habitat. It's played all over the world from Kenya, Nepal, Vietnam, India. And what I really like about this game is that they didn't start from a planning perspective. They started with the game. And I hope that all the architects that are watching the below 20 know this, because it's an awesome game and the interface is so what they do is they build a skill level of the actual location. You can see that on the picture. The top one is a picture from Nepal, and on the bottom you see how they design it. So it actually is quite some real interconnectivity behind it. And then with a lot of kids, they start developing these areas, like making big changes. And this is a really easy way to sketch it digitally and then see how it would work out if you can combine it to real life. And of course, Minecraft is not a perfect game to draw your plan, but it's a big, great starting point in which everyone can collaborate because it's super easy. Kids from a year of 6 can play it already. And because of that, it makes it really a big sketching map in which you can have 30 people at once draw on the same map to draw their ideas and try to explain it. And this is really about how participation can be done through games for placemaking. So if we look at the map again, it's really about the collaboration and interconnection, and also educate, especially because you played with children, what are all the connections if you look at urban planning. Then the co-analysis and co-design. I think this is a perfect example of co-design of what a public space could look like. And in the end, you end up with a design and a big collection of knowledge of what the stakeholders that were involved in this process actually need. So in terms of mechanics, it's really about a simulation of what it could look like. And then if you look at the dynamics, it's a digital game that you could use for data collection. And in terms of aesthetics, it's about imagination. They're all blocks, so I wouldn't call it sensation, but about imagination and assemblage of a good design. On the scale level, well, having to imagine that you have to build an entire metropolitan in Minecraft, it's gonna be daunting. And so I would say it's mostly about a neighborhood or street level. And you can use it, especially with the community, and planning experts and policymakers who look at the designs from the community in backhand. And if you look at how big you can scale it up, like they played it with more than 50 people in one map, you can really scale it up and make it bigger. And I think this could very well be a very interesting step for the future of games in placemaking. So the big question is, what can games do for us in the future? Because what I just showed you are some state-of-the-art examples that we have now. But it's only going to get bigger because we're going to have more smartphones, we're going to be more digitally educated people. Also, the elderly from now is me. The elderly from the future is me. Like, I'm going to be able to work with a smartphone. I'm going to be able to use a computer. And this is something that grows bigger and bigger. And this is also the big question that I asked during a creative capacity building workshop in Breda to my students. Around 50 people participated, and this was one of the winning ideas. And it's really a combination, actually, of the two projects mentioned above. It's called Your Backyard, and it's about a planning process that municipalities could facilitate in their city. So in the map, they pinpointed different locations in which they try to do implementations and changes. All the information can be found at that data location, could be used through a map, and people can look at the information about the reasoning, but also at the AR models that are there. So if you're there and you open the app on your smartphone, you can look at the building that they envisioned. But, and that's a connection to Minecraft, you can also try to design your own idea of it. And then after each round, people can vote on what are the best ideas, what are good solutions, and also can come with good examples on how to make it even better. And this is really about a way of sketching with the people together how a city could look like. And I think this is a very doable future because if it's technically possible, we will do it. So this is a good example of try to envision how the future could look like. So for me, this also means that there's finally some data-driven urban planning and design. Because if you use with all those geolocations and have information about all those plans, you can evaluate all those patterns on which people like and what ideas people don't like. You can try to analyze it with an AI and to really make it like developing itself. Because if you look at if all the cities in the Netherlands do this, you can have more data and see, okay, this works very well in this sort types of environments and this doesn't work there. But Palermo, for example, could be very different because here it's 13 degrees, in Palermo it's 39 degrees. So public space look very different at the moment. And I think that is something that is very interesting to think about as an urban planner, as an architect, also for municipalities. What can we do with this sort of using games for collecting data to improve our way of planning and architecture? So this is something I always like to do with my students. There are 3 things that I mainly want you to remember from this presentation. And the first one, there are many games out there. People are developing game at a huge pace. It's going faster every year. But if it does not feel like a game, it's probably not a game. So really think about the game elements and how you can implement them. Play with a purpose is a mighty combination because if it's fun, people will continue working on it and do it in their spare times. And that is one of the best examples for participation. Make it fun and make it interesting at the same time so you can really use that data. And I would like to like you to imagine the possibility of the marriage between games and urban planning and how this could translate to data. So we're going to have a Q&A after this. And one of the things I would like you to think about is what would you like to know when searching for a placemaking game? And the reason that I put this question in is also to make our work better, to make it more suitable to your needs. So if you have ideas, please share it in the chat and I would like to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick, for your very interesting presentation. I would say that in the chat for the moment, there are not specific questions. You can also write questions later about this presentation.
Absolutely.
So now I would pass to the presentation of Davide Leone. So about the play in a...
We have a question.
Yes, we have a question.
From Luisa.
Okay. Allora, I don't know if you see it, Nick. The question is...
I can read the question for you, Chiara and Nick. It says from Luisa Fernanda, how can we apply games and tech to approach the challenges of understanding urban spatial segregation? If you would like to answer.
Very interesting question. So if you think about urban spatial segregation, so it's very important to define what segregation in this term means, because segregation, it could be of different purposes in urban planning system, could be of different groups of people in a system, could be about ethnic segregation, segregation in public space. Great, I can see the chat. So how can we apply games and tech to approach the challenges? So I think that games really work very well to see what the needs are of certain groups of people, and make it interesting to see, also to use the collaborative understanding of the participants, and in that way sort of a mapping system. And if you make it digital, you can collect data in a way that you could see what works there and what doesn't work somewhere else. And if you look at the segregation, there could be many actors triggering segregation. And if you design a game that is able to also identify the different ways of segregation, different reasons for segregation, you can also try to understand it better. And if you do that on a bigger scale and try to theorize it, you can make a theory of segregation based on actual data. So I think that could be a way in which games can really build up with data to understand segregation better. And I hope this answers your question.
Okay, yes. Can I make also another very short way to think about games, about segregation, because games are also a platform in which you can push people to do something that they don't want to do usually. So, for instance, if you have a segregated part of a city that is not at all segregated physically, but a segregated part of the city because of its role inside the city, you can push people to visit this part of the city and to understand in which way is segregated, if it's true that is segregated, if you can push people to do something that is not usually made. And so people can really understand that a city is made of different parts, but maybe the one that we think that are segregated, you can go in, you can visit, and you can do something in that part of the city. So games are really, really interesting because you can make inside a game system things that usually you don't want to do. And it's the first day of another story. So for me, this is really another approach to think about games, not only to collect data, but also to push people to do something different.
Okay. I also see there's another question from Clara.
Yeah, it says, yeah, what practical scenarios or cases do you know from your experience that have used games for a particular purpose?
Yes, so the Redesire game I told you in this presentation about was actually developed by a company named Heijmans, and funded by the company named Heijmans, and it has been tested many times in the Netherlands. So it has been used at 8 different locations. And it's always part of a process. So it's not about replacing the process, it's part of a process. And also in Breda, for example, we have, this municipality have acquired an area in the center of the city, and they're also going to use games in October to try to map the different possibilities for that from different stakeholder groups. And there are many more applicable scenarios where games has been used for a particular purpose. How do you propose a game to a community? That's a very good question. That really depends on the game, of course, and its purpose. So if you play it with the Minecraft game, for example, one of the best ways to do it is to go to school or go to programs in a city that already work with children, because that's a very easy way to get children involved about thinking about a different area. But if you have more the Redesire scenario, like the game I told you before, you're not going to play it with children, so going to school there is probably not the best approach to get good quality people to think about location. So good strategy that can be used there is to really invite certain groups of people, like neighborhood associations, architecture companies, people from the municipality, if they would like to participate in it. If you think about an even bigger scale, about inviting an entire neighborhood, then it's an approach that we usually undertake. It could be to send them all a letter, like, we want to play a game, and it's going to be this sort of game with this sort of purpose. Really try to explain well what you try to do. Also explain that you try to make it fun, because it's really important that you not only try to collect something, but also to bring something to them and ask them to participate. So it's really about mostly actually like the standard participation process, but think about who your group is and what the purpose of the game is, and then try to invite accordingly. Are there any other questions?
Okay, for the moment, it looks like that there are no other questions.
Yeah.
So we will pass to the presentation of Davide. Nick, you should...
we have one last question, if we can answer it before we go with David, if you don't mind.
Okay,
it's from Malak, and it says, how can games be designed for post-occupancy?
The way to make from a space, a place, like a place where people want to come, is to have an activity there. So a way to do that is really think about games that facilitate some sort of activity, something that brings people there, to make it a lively area. And I think games are an excellent example of how you could do that, because it's a really way to look at fun locations. And we saw it when Pokemon Go hit the cities. At a moment, there were big groups of people going all over the cities at locations they would never go, because a certain Charizard was there, for example. This is a very easy way of think about how you can make a location more interesting with an extra layer over it.